Welcome to the John Cady Podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. Today is a special day as it marks the 5th anniversary of my exodus from the state of Maryland to Oklahoma, where I currently reside. In particular, escape from Baltimore, because that was where I lived. I lived in the Baltimore area, specifically the Middle River part of Baltimore. My girlfriend and I had struggled for a while to come up with the money and the means to move from Maryland to Oklahoma. And why did we want to move to Oklahoma in the first place? One, the cost of living was a lot cheaper. Two, I wanted to be closer to my son and my daughter who lived up in Kansas with their mother right over the state line. Where we decided to settle was only going to be a short drive, about 20-25 minutes with light traffic. This allowed me to be able to go up there and spend time with my children, yet at the same time, their mother and I would have space. That's a good thing. The moving process was a mess. First off, we're getting ready to move right at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Oklahoma was doing fine. They had already opened just about everything up and were almost back to normal. However, the state of Maryland, and in particular the Baltimore and Baltimore metro area, most of it was still under lockdowns. It was a pain just to go anywhere. And if you had to take the bus, forget it, because they were extremely limited as far as how many people could ride the bus. The front half of the bus was completely blocked off to protect the driver. They only wanted essential people riding the bus in the first place. So that made the only way accessible anywhere was by car. That was a nuisance and a headache. Several things were going on at the same time that led up to the move. One, thanks to the wonderful policies of Baltimore County, where landlords were now being forced to take in Section 8 housing without any limits or restrictions, the people who weren't eligible for Section 8 had to pay more and more rent to the point where they got priced out, and that was what happened to us. We got priced out as well, so we were left with no option. And me being a veteran and being faced with the possibility of ending up homeless, that just wasn't acceptable. We had to get out of there, and we had to get out of there fast. And we were tired of the lockdowns. We were tired of all the other nonsense and the woke ideologies that were just permeating all over Baltimore and making life miserable for everybody. The next step was finding movers. Once we decided that we were going to leave, we were going to go look at movers and find one that would help us out. Movers aren't always the most honest people, as we learned the hard way. The mover that we talked to was based out of New Jersey. They told us that they could move a 600 square foot unit. Well, we're like, that's how big our townhome is, 600 square feet. What the movers didn't tell us, though, that it was 600 square feet of stuff. In their opinion, they felt that we had too much stuff, and they only moved about 1/3 of it to Oklahoma. I ended up having to load the rest in the car, and what I couldn't put in the car, I ended up having to take down to the rollaway dumpster by the maintenance office where I was living. And that took a couple weeks to get everything cleared out, and it was painful. I felt like crying every single time because there was just so much memories and so many things that we had and we had accumulated over the years. And basically, we were being forced to start over with almost nothing because these movers, basically, they jacked us around. They screwed us over. That just simply wasn't cool. It got even crazier after that. Cassandra left for Oklahoma a couple weeks before I did. She got a hold of my children's mother, and the two of them went shopping around for apartments there in both southeast Kansas and in northeast Oklahoma. They found one here in Bartlesville, where I still live. It was only 20 miles away from Cady, so that made it easy for me to go up there and visit my children whenever I wanted. The price of the unit was also very reasonable. It was almost half of what we were paying in Baltimore. So we're like, this is good. There were other factors going on as well, besides shady movers who didn't want to take all of our belongings, the search for affordable housing. Also, I was dealing with an employer who was on the brink of going out of business. That employer went out of business for reasons that were not associated with the pandemic. And that's all I can say about it because there are some legal restrictions as to what I can and cannot say about the company I used to work for. But let's just say that it wasn't good. Even getting my final paycheck was a nightmare. I ended up having to go through the Maryland Labor Relations Board just to get my final pay and get everything straightened out so I could draw unemployment, even though it was obvious that the company had gone out of business. On a side note, former colleagues brought up from time to time, well, do you ever hear from the former owner? I said, no, in fact, I blocked that person because after messing everybody over, promising us that we were going to be able to pick up our final paychecks, only to find the office was completely locked up and nobody there. And then when my final paycheck came, it bounced. That's why I had to get a hold of the Labor Relations Board and pursue action against my former boss. No, I wanted nothing to do with that person anymore. I blocked the owner on all my social media accounts. I wanted no further contact with that individual. The moving company, once everything arrived that they did move, practically held our belongings hostage. And we were at the point, okay, I'm going to have to come up with extra money that you didn't tell us before. So now we're going to have to pay you more just to get our stuff and have it brought in. And they wanted it in cash, not debit card, not credit card, not even a money order. They wanted cash. That moving company, thank God, is no longer in business. A search on the Better Business Bureau for the state of New Jersey showed that that company is gone. There were multiple complaints against them. The owner of that moving company went to prison. Moving here to Oklahoma was a nightmare. The final struggle that we dealt with in moving here was getting my car insurance, of all things, because the state of Maryland kept threatening to levy a fine, and I had to work with my insurance company. And I give State Farm a lot of props on this because they helped me out a lot with getting this mess straightened out with the state of Maryland. Once the tags for Oklahoma came in, I was able to switch them out. I mailed the Maryland tags back. Surprisingly, the state of Maryland just shut up about it. They didn't bother me anymore. The things I like about living here in Oklahoma compared to Maryland, of course, I mentioned that the cost of living is a lot lower, and by and large, everything's more affordable here. I also like the fact that a lot of the things I like to do and where I work are all very close to each other. My medical is close by, the grocery stores I go to are close by, the pharmacy's close by, a lot of the other shops are close by, and visiting my kids, like I said before, is a lot easier than what it could have been if I had stayed in Maryland. The other thing I like about Oklahoma is that it is a much more conservative state, and the values there are easier for me to deal with than what I was dealing with in the Baltimore area. Not to mention that crime in Bartlesville is a lot less than Baltimore. When they talked about, even in Tulsa, having 50 murders for the year, this was like the first year I was here, I looked at my girlfriend and I said, honey, that's only in the first month or so. When we lived in Baltimore, Baltimore was running over 300 a year. They were like murder capital of America. Here it is, 5 years after moving here to Oklahoma. I don't have any regrets about moving here. I may have some issues at work, but that's a work-related problem, not an Oklahoma-related problem. But overall, with everything being closer and being closer to family, that's a win in my book, despite all the nonsense that I had to deal with just getting here. The best part, though, was still, at the end, looking in my rearview mirror and seeing Baltimore fade into the background, knowing that I was never coming back, nor did I want to come back. This is John Cady. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you like the content, hit like, hit subscribe, and I am looking forward to you on the next one.